And folks, let me just be really candid. I am much more of an in-person instructor than I am an ideal webinar leader. So definitely, if things come up that are unclear or you need me to restate something or whatever that case may be, please use that chat box so Charlotte can interrupt me and have me take a moment. Okay, so again, we're diving into professional branding for life after VISTA today. And oops, let me do a presenter view. Let's see, I think I can do. Okay. I'm trusting everyone can see this, Charlotte, unless you tell me differently.
Looks good.
Great, thank you. So today just really taking some time to cover just a couple of key pieces around personal branding. And we are going to rock through 4 different segments. The first one, we're going to focus in on gratitude and really about, as you wrap up your experience, how do you leave in a really great way? And how do you keep good relationships with previous supervisors and professional relationships? Second one's going to be really diving into that online self piece, right? Like what are you portrayed as online? What's your story to people who are looking you up? Third one is keeping it simple, thinking about the language we use on our resumes, and our cover letters and our interviews. And then fourth, always asking for permission from our professional contacts. And what to expect from today, a couple of key things. I did really build this to be interactive, so I'm hoping that folks will chime in on chat box at different questions, so please be alert to that. I'll definitely be asking for feedback, and you will have the opportunity to volunteer to be a test case a time or two throughout our process. So if you are open to that and willing to take a risk, we'd really love for a couple of volunteers. And then lastly, the most important piece, which I think is true with most learning, is some of this you'll hopefully find helpful. Some of it you might already know, and some of it really might not fit the place that you're at, and that's all okay. My hope, though, is that everyone who's here does walk away with a new strategy or a new opportunity in front of them. And we did intros and waiting. And I know this came up a couple of times, but just a quick check-in so I have a pulse of where we're at. How many weeks do you have until your term's completed? Could you just pop those numbers into the chat box? Again, just how many weeks until you are done and out the door from your organization?
All right, so Becca, if you can see the numbers rolling in, we have 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks.
Okay, so you guys are counting down hours. We are past that week. We are at days and such. So congratulations to all of you. Excuse me, for getting through, and I can't manage this, for making it through your service here, really reaching the end. As Charlotte mentioned, I also I'm an AmeriCorps alum, and I did 2 terms, and so I get what it's like to be down to those final days and weeks. So well done. And then next quick check-in question, how many of you do have your next step lined up? So that could be your next employment, I've heard grad school in the mix, or another program. Can you just go ahead and hit a yes if you have a game plan, or a no if you are still in process?
So far, we have 4 yeses, 1 no. You can put me in for a no, Becca. Although I have a little time to figure it out.
Awesome. Okay. So thanks for that again. Just wanting to kind of get an idea. It is perfectly normal and great if you don't have a plan yet, because you will figure one out. So if anybody is stressing out, it comes together. Okay, so let's launch into it. Personal brand in a nutshell is what other people say about you. It is the message that people hold in their head and what they tell other people about you when you are not around. Simply, it's your professional reputation. So that's really what we're focusing in on today, is being conscious of the things we can do to really make sure that those external messages that other people share are going to be in our favor and going to be more positive. So quick little graphic I obviously stole from online, which is a little bit blurry, but another way to think of it is your personal brand is really kind of this intersection, right, between how you think you come off and how you see yourself, and then how others see you, and it's kind of this midpoint in between the two. So how others see you might be in line with some of the things you think about yourself, but there might be other things that just are not getting communicated. So we're going to try to make that brand as close to yourself on the blue side as possible. All right, so first section to talk about is really this gratitude piece. So I encourage everyone to amp up their gratitude and stay focused in your final 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months. So it's easy to start getting distracted if you have something new and exciting coming up. It's easy to get distracted if you don't have a game plan. And frankly, some of you might be just plain tired of your assignment. So really, first thing to start with is staying focused. Excuse me. The second one is I encourage everyone to request a meeting directly with your supervisor. So some of you probably have one-on-one regular meetings or occasional one-on-one meetings. Some of you might rarely have them, and some of you might never have them. And I encourage folks to get on your supervisor's calendar, block out time so it's not when there's other things going on or a quick talk over lunch. And the two things to really bring up is, what results should you focus on in these last days that you have? Like, what does he or she or they want to see from you? What would make this a clean exit for you? So how do you, just transparently asking, what results do you want to see from me, so that you know how high that bar is or how not high that bar is. The second one is, if you haven't already, ask your supervisor if they consider being a reference for you in the future. So a lot of times we take for granted that just because we work for someone, that one, they'll be willing to be a reference for us, and two, that they'll be willing to be a reference who speaks positive about our performance. So having this candid conversation on the front end is really important. And a quick highlight, that references matter. Some positions, some programs aren't going to check references, but many of them are. And your references can make or break your opportunity with an organization. And if you have a reference, or excuse me, let's try that over. If you have a reference who agreed to speak on your behalf, but you don't know what they will say, there's a possibility that if you don't have a close relationship with them, they aren't going to put you in a super favorable light. I have overseen a lot of staff in my professional career at my day job, and I definitely had a couple of folks who didn't perform well. They weren't a good fit for the team. They didn't have passion. They didn't have follow through. And then they would make me a reference on a document, and I would get a phone call, and I would be honest. And so I'm hoping that that wouldn't be the case for many of you, but I do want to be transparent to say that it is not a reference's job to speak highly of you. It's a reference's job to speak of you, and your job to find the right reference. Next one. Again, those employers and programs, some of them are definitely going to want to know about your background and your habits. Were you on time? Were you a relationship builder? Were you a challenger? Were you a get things done person? These are all important things to be thinking about when you identify your references. So that third bullet, identifying your positive reference, that's the biggest piece. What you can do is really be clear that your references think highly of you and can articulate that. And then going back to the point on the last screen is, your last impression can really outweigh your collective performance. So as you're in your final couple of weeks, and for those of you who may be checking out, highly encourage you to be on your game, because no matter how great you were, if the last couple of weeks you start dropping the ball or coming in late or taking more vacate time, this will be the last taste that's left in that supervisor's mouth, so just be alert to that. Okay, so I'd love to do a check-in again, and please, if you have something to share, I would welcome this. But what challenges have you personally had with past references? And the other question would be, what successes have you had? So if you've had any challenges, go ahead and type challenge and give us a quick synopsis of what happened. And if you've been someone who's had successes with your references, type in success and give us an example. Really like for us to kind of do some peer learning here versus me just talking at you.
So I have a challenge I could share. When I was applying for this VISTA leader position, one of my references had just had a death in her family, which was very sad. And my boss could not for the life of her get a hold of her. I think that availability, yes, and Janet just mentioned this in the chat, getting people to respond in a timely fashion. Sometimes people have like emergencies come up, or sometimes they're just not very responsive at all. Mm-hmm. So that is always a challenge, I think.
How did you deal with that? Charlotte, sorry.
So I believe I did send some gentle reminders, and I'm sure my boss was pretty persistent as well. But I don't really have a great answer for that. I'm not sure what the best way to go about that situation is, because you obviously still need to show gratitude that they're willing to be a reference, even if they're not punctual. So that's difficult.
I definitely encourage folks to have more than 3, right? It's pretty consistent that we're asked to give 3, and 3 will be checked. But I would encourage having those kind of alternates and understudies in your back pocket if something like that happens, so that you can, instead of keeping weight and getting stressed out on one person's life circumstances or lack of time management, that you've got another reference to roll out there to keep the process going. Has anybody had any other challenges? Oh, okay. So I'm gonna you used to resent being asked to write your own reference letter, but now you've got it down and your letters are beautiful and they're easier for your supervisors. So Jay, Harry, so what you're saying is your references would then forward those to you and ask you to do them on behalf of yourself, correct? Okay, great. And this is more and more common, guys, and depending on how extensive the references are, this could happen to you if it hasn't already. So great point, saving those letters so that if you get asked to do them, in the future or after that one, that you've got content ready to go. I will absolutely tell you that I've been asked to do that on behalf of myself. And sometimes, depending on the job, that actually might be a win if you get to speak on behalf of someone else. And I have also asked others to write their own as well. So it is definitely becoming a little bit more common, especially when organizations send massive reference checks forward. So thanks for sharing that one. Has anybody had any successes that they want to offer up? Going to trust that you all have had some successes, and so let's keep going. So definitely on the space of amping up your gratitude. When you're thinking at the close of your service, I would encourage you to definitely take the time to give an intentional thank you to your supervisor in the form of a thank you note, a coffee, a lunch, something that is simple, but something that's one-on-one, that just is a way to state your appreciation. Couple of things. You're doing this to stand out from your peers. You're doing this to be remembered. Again, you're really trying to kind of, if you will, add a nice little bow at the end of your service term so that you leave on great terms. And then I encourage folks to check in with former supervisors, not just your AmeriCorps, but any other ones you have had or will have, once or twice a year, just by shooting a quick message, if you have a text relationship, but doing something, right, to really connect and raise your visibility with them. I'm going to skip this and go right. I'm going to share a couple of samples for folks who, to kind of look at different ways that you can do this. And I gave just very brief, short email examples that fit my personal experience. And you could do it a few different ways. You can think of these contacts as compliments. You could think of them as just simply ways to say, hey, I'm thinking about you, and you can ask. And so this is an example of a compliment where a former supervisor, and there might be a typo in this, folks, and it's just a lot of words, but just reaching out to a former supervisor to say, I thought about you at a conference I was at. Like your determination was amazing, and I'm thinking of you. And so just stay on that person's radar, because I don't know if I will need to reach out to her in 6 weeks or 6 years for a reference, but I want to stay present and have just a professional, positive connection so that when I do contact her, I've increased my likelihood that she'll be willing to be that reference when needed. Another one is a simple connection. So Sandra used to work for about several years ago, actually, and this woman can make the meanest tamales in the world. Didn't really learn a super ton from her as far as professional skills went, but my relationships building skills were really strong, and I got to practice those with her and in that role. And so just saying, hey, I had tamales, they weren't as good as yours, hope you're well, is another opportunity. And then the third one being a clear ask. So this was to a board member that I worked with several years ago. He's a really on-spot guy. He doesn't like a lot of stuff. He likes bullets. I want to be really clear, because he's busy, that I need him to be a reference that speaks to this thing and to this thing. So for him, it wasn't just will you be my reference. It was, I need you to speak favorably about my relationship building skills. I need you to confirm my ability to strategically work. So this fits some people and not others, but just an example of that it can look really different in how we maintain those contacts with folks. So I'm going to call a practice time, and I'm going to give us a minute, maybe two, and I would like everyone to, on your computer or grab a pen, I want you to think of a former supervisor, or even your current supervisor if you'd like, and I want you to just jot down a very brief message that you could send them to keep that connection going. So take a minute. What would be a very brief, straightforward message that you could send to stay on their radar? And let's take a minute starting now. All right, so we have a time's up. So we've got one in the chat box, right? Keeping them appraised of the progress in the certificate program that they recommended me for. Absolutely. And Charlotte, since we have a smaller group, maybe we could even unmute and let another person or two share.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and should I just unmute everyone?
Let's do it. And let's have a couple of you also give some examples so we can just kind of keep this information sharing forward.
All right. Okay, everybody's unmuted now.
All right, 2 people, take this risk and give us some information, please.
This is Jess. I can share. I'm actually in my second year of service, so right around this time last year, I was finishing my first year out in Portland, Oregon, and so I wrote to my old supervisor, Margie, who just mentioned, I can't believe it's been a year since I finished the last position, and I have plans to go visit Portland in October, and I'm looking forward to making some time to go see her as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that one. Yeah, it's nice when you can get all the way back to where you were, so that's awesome. Who else? All right, we'll keep moving. So now let's talk about just that awareness of re-meeting your online self is how I like to say it. So the point of this, right, is to dive into what do you really think about that you that's online, that you that's on whatever social media channel, that you that gets searched and shows up. So especially for those of you who are still in a transition point and not sure what you're doing, this definitely is for everyone, but if you are in a seeking situation, definitely research yourself. So it's really important to figure out how much of your story is not uncensored, and what kinds of things aren't uncensored to the public. So obviously, Google yourself. If you haven't done that lately, do it. Do it while we're even on this webinar. And also say, Google your name with quotations. So, quote, Becca Turlau, quote. It can easily shift your search results around when you have those quotes there. So search both ways and just see what's showing up, what's on your first one or two, the first 2 pages when you search yourself. And being aware, are you controversial? So do you have different types of political interests that are really clear, or values, or the way you spend your recreational time? These are all your time and your choices, but definitely being alert to, is this something you would be comfortable letting everyone know about? And if that's the case, go for it. I know some people feel very free to share, and that's great. And if you're not, be aware of what your people can find when they Google you. So definitely tell you to check your social media privacy. Making sure your friends of friends settings are off when you're searching for work, I encourage, because when you think about it, it really is public if you have friends of friends. So if you have 500 friends and they each have 500 friends, that's 25,000 people, right, who have access to your information. And the world is smaller and smaller, especially if you have colleagues, coworkers, peers in your social networks. They have that too. And so don't let yourself get burned because you're sharing extensively versus just in your friend network. And again, thinking from that lens, are you controversial for this position? And I am not saying that you can't be controversial if you want to. If you want to, go for it. But be aware of how other people are going to see and going to perceive who you are. Okay. So switching gears and thinking a little bit about LinkedIn, I want to do a chat box count. How many of you actively use LinkedIn? So you have profiles up, you have information as far as your job history and your things like that. Can you go ahead and hit a yes if you're regularly using it a lot? No if it's just not really been something you've touched or touch often. All right. Well, a couple more folks we're waiting for. Will you go ahead and hit yes or no if you are actively or not actively using LinkedIn? Okay, well, based on our numbers, we have a mix, about a third. So just want to highlight, use it thoughtfully, okay? If you were going to use LinkedIn, be really clear and conscious of who you link to, and go ahead and use it if you feel like using it or not if you don't. Hands down, when you were sending requests to folks who aren't clear direct contacts, I would encourage you to send a message along with that. So I met you at this, or I read an article that you wrote here, I really liked it. We're in similar fields, I'd like to learn from you. And LinkedIn has a lot of kind of that cold connections, and it's up to you, but you'd rather stand out and have somebody search you and find out why you were LinkedIn as opposed to not knowing you. Next one is make sure that your content that's on your LinkedIn aligns with your resume. So whether you're copying or pasting or you're going to change the wording around, just be conscious that there isn't something dramatically different between those two mediums. And then definitely encourage you, if you are going to use it actively, to have a clear intro statement about who you are. And here's a couple of examples of the way that can be done. So I pulled these from my own network. So the first one was straightforward, right? Early career individual with experience and passion for outreach, event planning, marketing, communications. So she's stating her field that she comes from, right? And then also stating the types of work that she's interested in. Next one is a nonprofit fundraiser with proven results. Necessarily excellent at stewarding long-term relationships. So this one is a little bit more on the confidence side of things. Here's the result, here's what I do, I am great at it. So those are a couple of examples. That second one as well, the parentheses, if you are someone who's changed the name, I do encourage you professionally to consider keeping that name in parentheses, because people don't keep up with your day-to-day life. If I haven't seen you in 3 years and you got married, if you eliminate, or if you change your name in general, if you eliminate the name I knew you by, the connection can fade a little bit out, and I don't know you as quickly. So consider keeping that in parentheses for your professional role. Two more. One's from a CPA friend of mine. It's jargon that I don't understand, but it fits very much his industry that it's in. It's clear, it's straightforward, it gets your attention. He's clearly not going to be looking for a job anywhere other than the tax field, so this works. And then the second one being the job seeker, who calls that out from the very get-go, says what she does, and then says what she loves, right? So she's this type of trainer, she has a BA, or excuse me, she's a project management, and I don't know if that's business administration, I really don't. But right, she has this training experience and she loves to develop people. So hers is pretty straightforward for that right targeted niche. And I'll pause just for a few seconds. If anybody has a comment or a question about their LinkedIn piece, go ahead and hit that in the chat box. All right, looks like we're good on that. A third, keep it simple. Think about your resume, your cover letter, your interviews. You're going to maximize your opportunities for new work, new experiences being able to simplify your service and making it really clear for anybody who picks up your resume what you do. Tell people to spell out their service like they're explaining it, like to a high school student or to an aunt or uncle that you don't see very often. Be clear. Stay away from the jargon, a lot of the formality, unless you're like that tax accountant who's staying really niched in the world, then it might be appropriate. But if you're looking at new types of positions, I don't understand all the funding sources you talked about or the types of applications or the different systems. And so keep it very simple, and you can go into more detail later. And then again, basic, but needs a reminder often, avoid your acronyms and your specialty jargon. So definitely use numbers on your resume, things like how many people served, how many apps processed, the number of different clients and how happy they were, how long it took you to process different types of applications or things like that. And Charlotte and I talked about this beforehand, which she said doesn't necessarily fit with the VISTA role as far as including your service hours, but I would encourage you to think about saying a number like that. Lots of people still don't know what AmeriCorps is and don't realize that you are giving a year of service to your organization. So a best guess, if there's 52 weeks in a year, you worked 48 of them times 40. You have a number, and it's a big number, and so that'll catch people's attention. The number of times people have commented on seeing 3,400 hours on my resume, it's been many, many times. So I would encourage you just to consider it. Definitely add your proudest accomplishments, whether you wrote manuals or you hosted events, you won mini grants, you created an entire new program, you served more families, whatever that is, make sure that is included in your resume. And then lastly,
can I jump in here? Sorry to interrupt, Becca.
Thank you.
So you all should be keeping track of a lot of data in the Excel spreadsheet that's called the Performance Measures Reporting Tool. That is great to have for after your service and for your resume and for interview purposes. So make sure that you have copies of those spreadsheets, or even if you want to aggregate all of that data into one spreadsheet that you can take with you, email to yourself, put in your Google Drive, so that you have that data later on, because that's going to tell you how many volunteers you recruited, how, dollar value of in-kind resources, dollar value of cash resources, and all of that good stuff that's going to look really good on a resume.
Thank you, Charlotte. That's awesome. Yes, keep a master copy of your resume. You don't need all 96 points at once, but you'll start to forget when you leave. So thanks, Charlotte. And yes, take all that information with you so you can use it when it fits. I'm going to do just a brief kind of highlight of one of my former staff people was an AmeriCorps member out here in Boulder back in a few years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And she sent me her resume for feedback when she was looking at a job. And I just wanted to highlight this in case this resonates with anyone. But it's fairly straightforward, right? She attended educational courses. Here's the types of things she learned about. She did some lesson plans for an after-school program with the I Have a Dream Foundation. She coached girls in creating a teen pregnancy resource, and then there's a lot of details around that. So after I went through that, when we sat and talked about it, the goal was really to figure out how do we add some numbers to that, and how do we clean this up so it's a little bit more active than passive. And it was pretty easy to do once we started thinking outside that box, right? We can get so stuck in the moment that we don't think, how can we break this down further? So in her case, she co-developed a 6-page resource guide and resource website with 5 high school youth leaders. She provided 45-minute group coaching sessions weekly for 6 months to these youth leaders, identifying their area of interest, their planning, and executing those timelines. And so really thinking about it from a lens of how do we start to create a story so other people can read it and understand a little bit more about what went into those steps. So that third bullet, right? 15 middle schoolers, She had to facilitate these classes 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. She did all of her lesson planning. She surveyed students to show success. So really thinking about how do you really break down some of the key pieces of your work. And then in her case, she was a part-time member. So she completed more than 900 hours of community service, which has been something people keep referencing when she goes in and meets with them as well. Them as in her interviewers. Okay. So I'll take a brief, any feedback, comments, experiences with resumes that you would share forward with this group. All right, moving on. Oh,
Becca,
yes.
I'll just mention a resource that I'm going to be following up with. The George Washington University Trachtenberg School of Business has created these very extensive resume and cover letter guides that give some do's and don'ts and show really great examples of very successful resumes and cover letters. So that's something that I'm going to be sending out to all of you in my follow-up email, just FYI.
Great, thank you. And then in closing of all of this is, again, that awareness to always ask your contacts when you need things and not make assumptions. Because your contacts, they're limited resources. Folks will run out of steam, energy, move away. You will lose an email or a phone number. And so just being conscious that they really value those resources. So in your case, if you need a reference, always say ask in advance. Even if you've asked them a year ago and they agreed to do it, still checking in now is the right thing to do. It shows respect for their time, for their energy, and for their expertise. References can take, as a referencer, or referencee, as someone doing references, we're asked for anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour to advocate for other people. So just being really aware that that really is something that other people are choosing to share and offer you, so being conscious of that's important. And then if you're someone who's using your base because you need work, tell people clearly what you're looking for. 1 or 2 types of jobs. I'm on the AmeriCorps alumni page here in Colorado, and routinely somebody will jump on and say, does anybody know of work? I can't connect you to anything because I know of 8 different things right now. And if you didn't say you were really interested in urban farming, or you didn't say you were really interested in literacy or in housing, I'm not going to connect that to you until I know what you're looking for. So definitely when you are asking for help and looking for work, tell people an idea or 2 so that they can lodge it inside, and if they know something, they'll share it with you. Otherwise, they'll be more alert when your type of opportunity comes up in front of them. And then lastly, when people help you, thank them. And whenever anyone provides a reference for you, thank them as well. So definitely can't stress that enough. Keep those relationships going. And to do that is really about, right, affirming relationships. And that is the end of things. Are there any final thoughts, questions, or anything else anybody wants to share? Absolutely. And Charlotte, I'm going to change it. I'm going to turn it right back over to you now.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here and taking the time to join us for this webinar. I have recorded the webinar and we'll send out the recording and those resources that I mentioned, and be in touch about all of this great information I'll just plug really quickly for the few of you that are still on that I am doing an official end of service webinar on Monday at 3 p.m. And you should have received a calendar invitation for that. We'll go over end of service benefits. I'll answer any questions that you have. So I hope to see you all then, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you again, Becca, for offering your time and expertise on this topic and for being here to present today. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.